In 2008, I received a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to use their Picturing America posters in my art curriculum. This collection included 40 pieces of American art which spanned several centuries. A variety of artists were selected for this collection, including Grant Wood, Jacobowitz, Joseph Stella, and more. Several months ago, while I was reading Ronald Takaki's book, A Different Mirror, I decided to look over the artwork in the Picturing America set. There were several prints that had to do with Native Americans, and I noticed things that were odd when I read about them in the teaching guide. First, there is a beautiful cover illustration for the book, Last of the Mohicans. From an artistic standpoint, this illustration is beautiful. The off-center positioning of Uncas, who is colored in rich earth tones, stands against a cool-colored background. The contrast is striking and dynamic. The tribal paint on Uncas's torso serves as a strong focal point of emphasis. From a historical standpoint, however, this illustration is highly troubling. It is not an accurate representation of a Native American Indian. According to the artist N.C. Wyeth, it was not possible to make a careful study of the Native Americans featured in the novel. The character of Uncas in James Fenimore Cooper's book is clothed in a green hunting shirt. Wyeth chose to display the character shirtless and marked with war paint, displaying the popular notion of the noble savage and the idea that the American Indian were tightly bound to the idea of an untamed wilderness. I wondered why the National Endowment for the Humanities would include an artwork that was not accurate. Another artwork was created by George Catlin. It is a self-portrait of the artist painting Indian Chief Manitoba. At first, I thought Catlin was a pretty stand-up guy. After all, he spent several years traveling with various Native American tribes as they moved west. Then I found out that Catlin was a proponent of President Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act. He was in favor of the backhanded deals and the shoddy treaties that forced the Native Americans from their lands. George Catlin took it upon himself to record and document the Native American peoples, because in his estimation, the eventual growth of civilization and the westward expansion would cause the remaining tribes to die out. He never painted about the plight of the Indians, the hardships that they faced while they walked hundreds of miles. No, his historical documentation came in the way of simple portraits of various Indians. It was clear about the high levels of the artist's conceit, because when he would paint larger artworks in which he included himself, he always painted the natives surrounding him and their expressions in awe of him. I felt, as I read about him in the Picturing America set and in my subsequent research, that George Catlin was no friend to the Indians and would have gladly seen them die out. So I went back to the Takaki text, more specifically to a quote by an Indian named Red Cloud. "The white men have surrounded me and left me nothing but an island." This quote from page 97 hit me like a ton of bricks. I asked myself, why wasn't there any art about this? This quote brought up amazing imagery in my head, and I began to research more American art to see what there was regarding Native Americans. What I found was disappointing. Why is there a negative perception of Native Americans in American art? Artists like Theodore DeBry took innocent subjects of Indian women and sensationalized them in almost erotic ways. This style of art speaks to the way Indians were seen by the settlers. Possibly the only artist to depict Indians with some semblance of accuracy was Benjamin West. In West paintings in the 18th century, he painted Indians as accurately as possible, sometimes inserting them into paintings to tell a certain story. That is the case for the death of General Wolfe. Here, the Indian is part of three narratives: nature, war, and extinction. West paintings of Indians always have them close to trees and nature. In the death of General Wolfe, the Indian is symbolic of the Iroquois tribe, who were instrumental in helping the British take Fort Niagara during the French and Indian War. The way West has posed the Indian as well recalls an earlier painting which calls to the notion of the vanishing American. Even Benjamin West could see the lengths at which land was being taken from the Indians. Now, of all the artwork that records anything to do with Native Americans, the only positive pieces come from George Catlin, a man who, as I said earlier, didn't have a high opinion of the Indians. In all of his paintings, not once does he address the hardships that these people faced. His only goal was to paint pictures of them before they no longer existed. To me, that is not a beneficial look back to history. I feel we need to have the true narrative expressed in our art, a different mirror, so to speak, to add to the history of the United States. The white men have surrounded me and left me nothing but an island. I want to see art like that. Thank you.